for those who are joining us now, we asked people to tell us what kind of plant they would be for Halloween if they could be any plant. So if you want to write that in the chat, yeah, go ahead. But I'm gonna go ahead and start with the plant meditation. Let me see. Share my screen. Oh, here we go. Can everybody see that screen? The screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so yeah, as we're talking about two plants too that are highly medicinal and I think really special plants to the cultures that they come from, we wanted to kind of deepen our relationship to plants and go into more of the different like textures and imaginations that come with our relationship to these plants. So
sorry, 1 second. I don't know what other people see. I see like the whole desktop with your notes, and is that what everyone sees?
Yeah.
I think if you click out of that, Nadia.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's showing your speaker notes as well.
Oh, okay. How do I do it so I can
Hold
see my
on.
notes and present at the same time? Does anybody know?
I don't know, but it's fine like this too. It just shows the
Yeah.
I think when you share screen, you could also select like a particular window to share instead of.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the tech support. Okay, so we're doing our plant meditation, and I think something for me as I've been farming, just getting to spend more time with the plants kind of brings up different I don't know, like embodied feelings around like what these plants mean to us and memories, the places they're connected to, the people they remind me of. So hoping that we can just go a little bit into this. If you have the plant or fruit or vegetable with you, just hold it in your hands. And I'm just gonna ask folks to, if they want to, gently closing your eyes, connecting to your seat and your breath. And focusing your awareness on this plant, the produce, its fruit. And just thinking about the times that you turn to this plant, or food, is it in times of need? Is it for healing, nourishment, comfort? And what qualities draw you to this plant? Are there any memories woven in to the taste or smell or sight of the plant or fruit? And how do you feel when you eat or drink or smell this plant? Do you feel more connected to yourself, Do you feel comforted? Do you feel happy? Do you feel nostalgic? And I just want to invite you to tune into your body and notice which parts of your body feel nourished by this plant. Do you feel it in your breath, in your tummy, in your heart? Does it feel warm? And if this feeling had a texture or a color, what would it be? Would it be soft? Would it be slimy? Is it warm, colorful, bright, and brilliant? And now I want you to imagine that you're in a field of these plants, just surrounded by this plant completely. What does that feel like? You don't have to know exactly what it looks like, or if you haven't been close to this plant before, just imagine what it would feel like. Imagine what the soil looks like. Is it silky and loamy? Is it clayey? Is it sandy? Imagining the root systems and the mycelial networks and the microorganisms that are helping this plant thrive. Noticing what kind of weather is around you. Is it sunny? Is it cool? What environment does this plant like to grow in? Now I want to invite you all to touch into the memory and lineage of the plant itself. If this plant had a memory that you could touch into, what would that look like? What does that feel like? Do you have any ancestral ties to this plant? You think about how many generations of people have been growing, cultivating, harvesting, and evolving with this plant, and will continue to evolve with this plant. Ancestors, grandparents, great grandparents, future ancestors. And when you turn your awareness to that, what do you notice arises within you? How many generations have turned to this plant? And how many more generations after us will continue turning to this plant? I'm just noticing as we're doing this practice, how you feel now, and how does it feel different from before we started? And if you had something or anything you wanted to say to this plant, an offering, a prayer, giving thanks, anything at all, what would that be? And as we close, just returning to your breath, feeling your feet on the ground, your seat on the ground or in your seat, becoming more aware of the space around you. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. So I wanted to see if we have enough people, we can do breakout rooms and do a little sharing out about what that was like for everybody, what that experience felt like, anything, um, I don't know, important that came up or that surprised you, or like how you feel more connected, or what's that relationship like to this plant, or just anything at all. So I don't know, how many people do we have here?
We have a good amount.
Yeah, okay. All right, can you do the breakout rooms? Maybe
Yeah.
like 3 people. Um, and I got my Molokhia seeds from the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library in Batir, Palestine. It's a seed library that was founded by a woman named Vivian Sansour, and she works with local farmers to find and save heritage Palestinian seeds. Unfortunately, many of the seeds, like these like kind of heritage crops, have been lost through the occupation, loss of our agricultural lands, and that knowledge. So she's really been working to revive that kind of heritage and reconnect to those plants that we are have been cultivating for generations. And these are a couple photos of Batir. I was able to go there in 2019 and visit. It's a small village in the West Bank, just outside of Bethlehem in Jerusalem. And it's recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, actually. So you can see in the picture on the left, the kind of beautiful terracing. Oh, did I change something? No. Can you still see my screen? Yeah, okay. The beautiful terracing, and they're still irrigating their plants with a over 2,000-year-old irrigation system that was put in place by the Romans. And they actually have like an 8-day, they joke that they have an 8-day week, because each day of the week, the water is designated for a different family, like a different clan. So one day of the week is for this clan, next day. So there's 8 days in their week. And And on the right-hand side, you see this is a railroad track in the middle of the photo. And that is a railway line that was built by the Israelis. It connects Jerusalem to the different settlements. And it also annexed the lands that are across from the people of the village of Batia. So they no longer have access to these lands that they have been cultivating. You can see some of the like olive trees there. And then you can also see, it's very small, but there's like a white dot almost in the hillside there. That's an Israeli Jeep that's there at all times. It's patrolling and surveilling. And if anybody gets near the rail line or crosses over the boundary, they'll shoot at them. So they have to stay away from those lands, and they actually have to apply for like a permit to be able to go and tend to the lands on the other side of the railway line. So yeah, many of the plants that we have been growing in Palestine are I think more and more disconnected from it, in large part due to the Israeli occupation and loss of our lands. In 1948, 700,000 Palestinians were uprooted from their villages, and including my father's family, who are from a small village in West Jerusalem called El Malha, which is the photo you see now of the village. My grandfather built the house there. He was a stonemason, and it's actually currently occupied. So it still stands, but we no longer can go there. My grandmother was a fallaha, as they call her. She was an agricultural farmer. She used to grow many vegetables and also had a cow. And after 1948, when my family became refugees, it was the cow actually that sustained our family. My grandmother would sell its milk and grow and sell produce to support her family of 7 children. So when I talk about these plants, it's there's a whole context and story that I want to share with you too, because it's not just about the plant, it's about our history, it's about our lineage, it's about our resistance as people who are tied and connected to these lands. So in Palestine, farming really is an act of resistance to our erasure, our active and ongoing erasure. And many of the political movements and mobilizations against the occupation of our lands have been led by fallahin, or farmers and villagers. The work of Thuraya, the work that I'm doing, is guided by a desire to restore our connection to our lands, especially as Palestinians in diaspora, and to create archives of knowledge about our relationships to the land, our traditions, our practices, and our relationships to each other. I feel like doing this work is also a deeply healing work, and helps us get to know who we are. And bringing back these seeds from Palestine is a pathway to remembering who we are and where we come from. They're the seeds of our ancestors. And these photos are of fallahin, and on the left, it's the cultivating and harvesting wheat. And on the right, it's women who have harvested different produce, and they're carrying it in the traditional like baskets. So getting a chance to cultivate and spend time with these plants, for me, feels like a precious gift. While harvesting the Molokhia this season at Namu Farms, Kristen generously shared her harvest with me. I wasn't able to really get the plants thriving where I was growing them. But while harvesting the Molokhia, I thought a lot about my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was a farmer, and how her hands went through the same motions that mine were, from harvesting to plucking the leaves from the stems, washing and drying the plant. Felt more connected to the women in my family, and thought about the stories they told one another as they sat around a pile of Molokhia plants, processing the leaves, which is a very long, laborious process. Plucking leaves one by one was always done with the help of many hands. And our culture is one of oral histories and storytelling. So these processes are like part and parcel to the passing on of stories and knowledge and histories that are really essential to our survival. And and just our like memory keeping and story keepers. It also made me think a lot more about the collective practices and knowledge and bonds that have been erased alongside the erasure of us from our ancestral lands. These really are like collective processes. So just thinking about how we were cultivating land, and how, yeah, those different processes were ways of bringing people together. And the photo on the left is me with my friend's grandmother. We're making, in this photo, kusa mahshi, which is the stuffed zucchini. And on the right is a picture of my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. So these are photos of the Molokhia plant after harvest, and while it's in the ground. It's a plant, it's one of those highly medicinal plants that's rich in iron, fiber. It's incredibly healing, and it helps a lot with if you have digestive issues or insomnia. It's supposed to help you sleep. Just as a personal aside, I recently had a baby, and during the first trimester of my pregnancy, when I was feeling really nauseous and no foods appealed to me, one of the only dishes that actually I was craving was molokhia. And that also made me think more about the intelligence and wisdom of our bodies and how they also carry a memory of these plants and their meaning to us. So, it's like my body knew exactly what it wanted and what it needed in that moment. And I was thinking, like, the wisdom that we carry that we don't necessarily always notice or remember. Molokhia is also a heat-loving plant that grows pretty bountifully. You can plant it like lettuce and thin it to 2 inches apart. It can grow really tall, up to 8 feet. Also, I should also mention that it's a plant. I mean, jute is also used in many parts of the world as a fiber to make different things, cords and clothes. But when it's used for food, it doesn't grow quite as tall. It has small black seeds that germinate within a few days of planting. And you can begin harvesting the plant after 30 days of planting it, and continue to cut it when it's first growing. And continuing to cut it when it first grows helps encourage more branching and bushiness. And each seed pod, you can see it in the photo, the seed pods, each one contains up to 200 seeds. And when you harvest the plant, you cut each branch to a node and remove each leaf from its stem, which takes a really long time. And then you wash it, and then you dry it in a well-ventilated space away from direct sunlight. If you dry it in direct sunlight, the leaves turn black. So you can see in the photo, the plant after it's harvested, the plant while it's drying in the middle on a sheet, and then the plant on the right, that's the dried plant that you can store and then eat for, I think it stores for like at least a year, maybe longer. And yeah, that was everything that I had for the presentation. Oh, also another personal aside from this photo, in the middle when we were drying it, we were drying it in their like guest bedroom and sleeping in there. And whenever I would sleep in there, I'd have these like really wild dreams. So I really feel like, as it's known as a plant that like helps with insomnia, it's got to be doing something also to your subconscious. So anyway, that was just like something I noticed that I thought was interesting. Yeah, so thank you all for listening. I guess if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We can take some time now for conversation, Q&A, if you have anything.
You're getting some virtual applause. I don't know if you see it.
Thanks. I've been feeling the love. Thanks.
Nadia, I'm curious, what did your grandma grow?
She grew different kinds of vegetables, lettuce and zucchini, and yeah, different kinds of produce. And my dad would actually go help her sell it at the market, and that was also another source of like another way to sustain the family. But Al Malha was traditionally known for cultivating a lot of olives and wheat. And they would use the wheat stalks too to make baskets. Or not baskets, it's like a tabak. It's like a flat thing that you use as like a tray almost, to put it on the floor and you eat from it. Yeah. All right, well, I'm gonna turn it over to Ari.
Thanks, Nadia. That was such a good setup for the way that we talk about our ancestral foods. We didn't, I don't really know that we intentionally planned to have these two plants together, but I think it worked out really beautifully because they're both plants. I'll be talking about bitter melon, and I feel like they're both plants that have a lot of significant cultural meaning and a lot of, they're one of those plants that people like, you know, elders in Filipino culture turn to when you're sick. It's like the thing that you go to eat because it helps cleanse your body. And so I think it's a really beautiful connection between the two. Okay. I don't know. I think Kelly may have left, but it looks like my host status was revoked. Nadia, can you make me a host so I can share my screen? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Cool. So I realized we actually didn't introduce ourselves, but I'm Ari, and I run Kamayan Farm up here in Carnation, Washington. And I'll be talking about bitter melon today and just sort of the journey that I've been on as a farmer trying to grow bitter melon in the Pacific Northwest. So I have been farming for about 7 years now, I think. I've had my own farm for the past 5 or 6. And bitter melon has been a plant that I started.
Ari, I'm hearing your feedback, or is that just me?
Yeah, something weird is going on in the sound.
Oh, okay, hold on. Is it still happening when I'm not screen sharing? Okay, let me try. Let me try again. Okay, how does it sound?
You're good now.
Okay. Thank you for telling me. So this year I had the very special honor of planting my bitter melon seeds with my 5-year-old niece, which you can see in the picture on the left. And I thought it was really special. If you've ever seen a bitter melon seed, they look like these beautiful little tokens or coins that have really intricate patterns on the seed coat. And so every time she would plant a seed, she would tell me exactly what she thought the seed coat looked like what she saw in it, what the picture looked like to her. So it felt really special to have her involvement in the seeding this year. And I couldn't find any pictures of my Lolo, my grandpa on my dad's side, but he was a farm worker. He was from a rural area in the Philippines where they were rice farmers and subsistence farmers. And he ended up coming to the United States in the 1930s to work as an agricultural worker up and down the west coast of the US. And so I think about him a lot when I'm farming. I never got to meet him, but when I am able to grow these plants that have some ancestral meaning to him, I always think about him. And I found it really beautiful, Nadia, the way that you were describing just the process of working with these plants and being able to touch them and feeling like we know that all of our ancestors have touched these particular plants at some point too. So like I said, my farm is up in Carnation, Washington, which is just outside of Seattle. On the right side here, this is an overhead shot of the farm, I think probably before I started farming there. But this is the farm is in a historic river valley right next to the Snoqualmie River. And we're bordered on this other side by a stream. And so during the season from October to May, we get these big floods that flood the whole valley that we farm in. We just flooded yesterday, actually. And so there are many times throughout the fall and winter that our farm will be significantly underwater or inaccessible because there's a flood happening. So that's just part of the rhythm of our farm. But we also have a colder climate, or a climate that bitter melon isn't necessarily acclimated to. So today I thought I would share some of the experiments that I've been doing to try and facilitate bitter melon growing up here. So I think this picture is maybe from my first year of farming, and I got just a bunch of different varieties of bitter melon and was doing some tests on how to get them to germinate because it is so cold up here. And at the time I didn't have heat mats. I still don't actually, and I didn't have any way to sort of get them to germinate. And so I had found some places on the internet that said that if you clipped off a little piece of their seed coat and kept them in these moist towels in a warm area, that it would help them germinate. You can see in these photos that they're kind of coming out of that seed coat. This method did work, as you can see. I also found that a lot of the seeds just started to mold or just didn't germinate, and so it was pretty variable. But it was a good process to go through for the first time growing this plant to see how long it would take to germinate and how many of them would germinate in this way. These are photos of the varieties that I just showed in that past trial. And so this first year, or the first couple years we grew bitter melon, we grew it all outside. And so I was just sort of trying to see what would grow, how it would grow, if we would be able to get a significant amount of fruit from it or not. And so we did get fruit from all of these different varieties in that first year. I definitely found that this hybrid variety and the Ganju variety, which is, I believe a Japanese variety, were the most prolific in terms of producing fruit. But it was really special to see these other varieties on the farm as well. And these are all sort of different types of bitter melon that are eaten in different regions of South and East Asia and Southeast Asia. And so we had this in just an outdoor area that we called House of Asia, where we're also growing some upo and some long beans. So this was sort of the what production looked like on our first couple years. And like I said, these two varieties were sort of the ones that did best. And those are the ones whose seeds I've been carrying forward for the past couple years. In subsequent years, like the past couple years, I built this little propagation chamber out of very, very simple materials. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these sort of outdoor mini greenhouses, but somebody gifted me one once. And I find that they're kind of scary to use outdoors because if the door is closed, it gets really hot and will just kind of toast your plants. But I ended up converting it into this little prop chamber because I start a lot of my seeds in January and February here, when it's usually like freezing outside. So rather than trying to start seeds outside, I do them in a basement in this propagation chamber. And this is just this little insulated tent. I put some like insulation material around the outside of this. And then there's a crock pot on the bottom here. I don't know if you can see that. And it's attached to this temperature control that's in this picture on the left. And basically the way that it works is that there's this little temperature monitor here. And anytime the ambient temperature in there goes below a certain level, it'll, this little thermometer monitor will click the crock pot on and it'll start to warm it up again. So that's been helpful in terms of getting some of the warmer season crops like bitter melon to germinate or to germinate more evenly. It's still not great. So if any of you are expert bitter melon growers, I would love to talk about your techniques. We did have a really good year last year. Maybe you can see in this photo, we brought our bitter melon inside. We had this really big, beautiful greenhouse to work in. So we seeded a bed, or we transplanted a bed of bitter melon in there, and it had really lush, beautiful foliage growing. And you can see those two varieties grew out really well in there too. And for bitter melon, for folks who aren't familiar, you can eat sort of all parts of the plant. So most people eat the fruit, but in Filipino culture, we eat these young tips oftentimes too. And then the roots are used medicinally as well. Okay, so these are photos from this year, which was kind of a bitter melon disaster. We had planted these. This is a bunch of bitter melon, and then you can see on the bottom here on the right, there's tons of grass. Part of farming in a floodplain means that we get new weeds every year. So we're in an agricultural valley, but if we have neighbors that don't manage their weeds or whatever might happen, they will wash in with the floods. And so every year we face new and interesting weed seed challenges. So we had a lot of grasses, and then you can see that the bitter melon didn't actually produce a ton of foliage, nor did it produce a ton of fruit. And then you can see that also had this sort of, I think is blossom end rot right here. And I think part of the explanation might be that we had pretty wildly varying weather fluctuations this season. We hit 115 on our farm in late June, which is incredibly unusual, and had to just water as much as possible to try and get things through. But I think throughout the season, we had some pretty uneven watering overall. So that might have had a big impact on it. But I did want to highlight, some of you might know Ate Lorna from Sadiwa Farm. She is from the Bay, but she actually moved up to Washington a few years ago and farms just down the road from me. And I just wanted to highlight her beautiful trellis bitter melon because she had an awesome bitter melon year. So I know it's possible. And she planted hers a little bit earlier than ours. So I think that's going to be my goal for next year is to get it in the ground a little bit sooner. And I know that she was also hand watering, so it might have been a little bit more regular watering happening there. So I think that's it for my Ampalaya presentation. Do folks have any questions about that? Yes, Big Top is adorable. I love that variety. It's about, I don't know, the size of a tennis ball maybe.
Ari, do you not do the cracking the seed anymore then? You're just trying to figure out with getting enough heat early in the season that it seems like that's the bigger variable and not trying to actually crack that hard coat?
Yeah, I will sometimes just soak them before I seed them, but I found that cracking the coat was felt really dangerous to do. A lot of people suggest doing it with nail clippers, and so you're just trying to really pierce like that outer seed coat, but a lot of times you will nick the inner part of the seed, which is not good. So it felt a little bit too risky, especially when I had like small pools of seeds to begin with. I live in a neighborhood in Seattle actually where there are a lot of families that grow bitter melon in their gardens and a lot of upo and stuff growing around here. So I know it's possible. I just need some of that like elder wisdom.
Can we see it in a different form, like rounded?
You want to see the photos again?
No, I mean, do you have, because I remember in our country, we have another form, it's rounded, like tomato. Not like tomato, yeah, like maybe watermelon, but it's a small one.
Oh, and it's a bitter melon?
Yeah.
Does anybody know what variety that is?
Nadia, do you know what's that? No, huh?
No.
I will search, yeah, I will check.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
Ari, I have another question. Did you notice like just different seed yield variations like in the different varieties? Because I think it's notorious that you have a huge fruit sometimes and there's like 2 viable seeds basically by the time it splits. Did you find any varieties that had higher seed yield or?
That's a good question. I don't think I kept good enough records at that point about the seed yield per variety, but I do think just from memory, I would probably say that like this, I have one right next to me, this like long green variety, definitely felt like it had the most seeds. Also that Ganju variety, the Japanese one that's a little bit more textured. But the smaller ones pack a surprising amount of seeds from what I remember. I don't grow many of those anymore, just because a lot of the folks that we work with are more familiar with the bigger varieties.
I have a question. Where did the seeds come from?
It's a great question. So I think most of them came from Kitazawa seed. At some point in time, Kristen gave me some seeds. Just sometimes friends. neighbors. Yeah, I've tried lots of different varieties over the year, and I didn't go through my seeding records to see how many different, but maybe I should figure that out and share. Any other questions from folks? Suggestions? I'm open to that too.
I'm really curious. I know Lorna from Sariwa Farm had talked about a variety that her mom had brought over in a shoebox. And then she also has seeds that are like 3 years, basically just grown on her farm. And it'd be really interesting to try all those side by side. Like she has some of her mom's original seed stock and then some of the ones that she's been saving for 3 seasons to see if, you know, maybe that variety might thrive. Because she's in Carnation too.
She's in Woodinville, which is like 20 minutes away. Yeah, I'd be curious to see. I mean, they're very close, but they have a very different soil structure as well. And just, we're sort of in different microclimates. But I think because we had such a long, hot, dry spring and summer, I usually don't put them in until early June, but she got hers in a little bit earlier. And so I think if I was just to bank on the fact that we're probably going to be hotter and drier here for summers here on out, I would just start trying to get them in the ground earlier.
Well, I think a lot of people are really excited about having a cool climate adapted bitter melon. I feel like it's just people are, yeah, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's a big movement up here to get people excited about radicchio, and they always say bitter is better, but I feel like the next wave of that is really bitter melon, so I'm trying to make it happen. Okay, well, we just have a little bit of time left, and I had planned to do a little demonstration of making a bitter melon tincture. If folks feel excited about doing that together, we can do it pretty quickly. Okay. So I didn't talk too much about some of the medicinal properties of bitter melon, but bitter plants generally are associated with the liver and kidney and all the good cleansing organs. So I always think of spring and fall as a really good time to integrate bitter vegetables into your diet, because it's sort of the times when our body is like trying to adjust to these new seasons. And for me personally, my body always has a pretty hard time coming from summer into fall. And so I think a lot about bitter melon medicine this time of year as a way to sort of cleanse and get my body grounded for the season. And another thing that I think is really interesting about like traditional Filipino medicine, and this is also from traditional Chinese medicine, but the liver is associated with the emotion of anger. So anything that's like on the spectrum of anger, resentment, irritability, bitterness, that's thought to sort of, those feelings are thought to be held in your liver. And so taking bitter medicine or eating bitter melon can help sort of relieve us of some of those feelings, which I think is also like an idea that homeopathy later adapted, that when you're experiencing some kind of ailment, it's good to like have a little bit of it. So yeah, I thought I would just do a little bit of a demonstration of how I make a bitter melon tincture. So I'll just move my computer. You won't be able to see me, but you'll be able to see me doing this, hopefully. So I like making tinctures because they're really easy. You can usually do them with materials you have at home. So you just need a jar, and then you can make tinctures with apple cider vinegar or really any kind of vinegar. Or you can do it with vodka or some kind of high proof alcohol. I make tinctures a lot, so I have this big bottle from Costco, but you can get like organic vodka from Costco that helps to make tinctures with. And then for this version, I'm gonna use vinegar just because I think it's a little bit more accessible. It's easier to just like integrate into a salad dressing or something if you wanted. And yeah, for some reason, I just like the way that the vinegar interacts with the bitter melon a little bit better. I think it helps kind of take the bitter taste out of it. So when you take a vinegar bitter melon tincture, it's not quite as intense. So I cut this one in half already. You can kind of see there are these immature seeds developing in here. And if you were gonna eat this, typically you would scrape out this pithy middle part and these seeds. The seeds are the most bitter part. And so typically people don't really want to eat them, although I have seen some really interesting recipes for a sauce where you blend up the seeds with a bunch of other herbs and spices and onions, which I've never tried, but I'd be very curious to try. But since our goal today is to make a bitter for our body, I'm actually going to use the seeds and put them in my jar. So it's kind of like, because we're doing it with a vinegar, it's almost like we're making a pickle, except we're not watering it down at all. We want it to be really potent. And so what I'm going to do, and what you generally want to do when you're making tinctures, is to chop your material as fine as possible, because you want a lot of surface area for the vinegar to soak into and to extract from. And so I'm just going to start to chop this. But one of the things that I was thinking that we could do together while I'm chopping is that when I make medicine, I always try to have a good intention in mind, or a good sort of like healing thought or prayer in mind, so that when people take this, they can feel both the power of the plant itself, but that they can sort of feel the power of energy that I put into it as well. And I've also been taught by many of my teachers, like, never make medicine when you're feeling upset or angry or sad, because that's part of the medicine too. And I think about that a lot when I think about, you know, the way that our ancestors knew how to make these things, because I feel like oftentimes these are things that are made in community. And so you'd probably be like playing music or singing songs or gossiping, probably, if you're Filipino. And so all that good energy usually goes into this medicine. So I thought, while I'm just cutting this up, folks could think of like a good intention that you have for yourself or for your community as we move into fall. And if anybody wants to share it while I'm doing this, please go ahead. It can also just be like an intention that you have for how you want to take care of yourself as we start to move into this. Well, I don't know where everyone's located, but up here we're going into darker months. And so this is the time of year where I start to think really hard about how I'm going to take care of myself throughout the winter, because it's a time that I feel like I need to do a lot of nourishing to just get through the darkness. Does anyone have anything coming to mind?
The first thing that came up for me was just wishing good health for all and deeper connection to ourselves and each other.
I love that. Thank you. Anybody else?
I had food workers in mind, or people who share food, and supporting their health and wellness as well. Yeah, consider that.
Thank you. Yeah, all the food workers out there need a lot of support too. Okay, since we're getting close to the end of our time, I'm gonna stop with just this much in the jar, but I'll probably go back and keep filling it up. And if you were like a professional herbalist and you wanted to make sure that you were doing this very consistently every time, the sort of ratio that we normally use is if you're using a fresh herb, you want to do, you actually want to weigh how much of the herb you end up, or plant material that you end up chopping up. And so you would do 1 part of that herb weight to 2 parts of the whatever liquid you end up using. It's also called a menstruum. So you can do it that way. And then there's also just like, you could use your intuition. And so either way, there's going to be some kind of medicine that comes out of this, right? But it's just about practicing kind of what we've been talking about today of like, how much do you feel like you know about this kind of medicine from your ancestors. So I'm just going to do this for now until it goes right over the top of those herbs. So I'm not sure how clearly you all can see this, but I mostly just want to make sure that everything is covered. And if I were going to leave it like this, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take, if you have like fermentation weights, you can put it on there to make sure everything is fully submerged. Or if you don't, another trick is to take like a Ziploc bag and fill it with water and put it inside of there so that it presses all the material down, and then you can put your lid on top of it. And so just to show you how I would finish this off for now, I usually, when I'm done cutting everything up and filling it up, I usually put like a piece of wax paper or parchment on top, and then I screw my lid on. And that's just to make sure that this liquid, whether it's like vodka or apple cider vinegar, it won't corrode any of the stuff that's in the lid into your medicine, because you want to make sure that's nice and healthy for people to have. And then the last step I would do is to put a label on there. So I would just write bitter melon tincture in apple cider vinegar and the date. And then a lot of people like to make medicine on like special moons, like if it's a full moon or a new moon, and sometimes they'll make a note of which moon it is too. So I usually let tinctures sit for at least 4 weeks. And one thing that's kind of special about this kind of medicine is that you can have a practice of coming and shaking it every day. And so if you have some of those good medicinal intentions, you can just think about that while you're shaking it up every day. So that's it. Super easy. I hope you all try it with some plants sometime. And yeah, I think we're at time. Do folks have any questions about that?
It was not a question at all, but it was really like meditative and I kind of like zoned out a little bit when you were just hearing like how satisfying it is when you were slicing the bitter melon. I like couldn't answer your question earlier because I was just like kind of staring at and just watching like the repetitive process for a bit. But thank you so much for sharing. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm happy to bitter melon ASMR you anytime.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was really cool, Ari. Also, it was a little bit anxiety inducing watching you with the knife chopping. I was like, yeah, but I would love to try and make something like that. Sounds wonderful. When you've made them and you take them, do you notice that it like does help you with your health and wellness?
Yeah, it's interesting because I haven't been eating a lot of bitter melon this season just because we didn't produce a lot. But in preparing for this presentation and just reminding myself of all of the like health benefits, I was like, this is the plant for me. Like, I need to be taking this more often. And so I usually will like take a little spoonful before a meal, like 5 minutes before I start eating. And I feel like that helps me a lot. But I didn't have time to get into sort of like the health benefits. But if anybody wants to look up bitter melon, there's so many different articles and medical journals that talk a lot about it. It's just a very powerful, potent plant to be using. And I really like either making like achara, which is like a Filipino pickle, or mixing it with vinegar like this, because I feel like it just really helps take some of the edge off the bitterness. All right, well, thank you so much everyone for joining us today. I think I'm trying to remember what crop we're moving into in November.
I think we're doing kabocha.
Okay, so it's almost the end of October. When we hit November, we're going to start talking about kabocha all month, and then we'll have another potluck at the end of November as well to share more about that plant. So I hope you all join us. And thanks so much, everyone, for sharing your intentions and your plant meditations with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining in and being here.
Thank you for both of you.
You guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Bye.
That was really special. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.